Today we continued our unit on understanding fractions. The kids had an activity to complete. They were given strips of paper and pretended they were in Mr. Jacobs' art class. Each one had a different number of students, and each group had a different number of strips of paper. Group 1 had 5 students and received 4 strips of paper. Group 2 had 6 students and received 4 strips of paper. Group 3 had 12 students and received 9 strips of paper. And Group 4 had 5 students and received 6 strips of paper. Group 1 determined that each person in the group got 4/5 of a strip of paper. Group 2 determined that each person got 4/6 of a strip of paper. Group 3 determined that each person got 9/12 of a strip of paper. And Group 4 determined that each person got 6/5 of a strip. That meant that each person in that case got 1 1/5 of a strip of paper. Once we talked about this, we determined that fractions are determined by having the part, what am I breaking apart, over the whole. How many people or how much do I have in my group? So when you talk about fractions, you always want to look at the part over the whole. We went through some practice ones. The first one was you had 12 bricks of clay and 5 students. We circled our numbers, 12 bricks, 5 students. We determined that since we had more bricks than students, that we would be able to use whole bricks for this. So we broke it up into 5 groups. We had student 1 get 2 bricks, student 2 got 2 bricks, student 3 got 2 bricks, student 4 got 2 bricks, and student 5 got 2 bricks. We had 2 left over. That time we divided them into groups of 5 because we have 5 students. So we went ahead and broke them up into 5 pieces. Each one was divided up to determine how much each person would get. And then we numbered them. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to represent the students. In this case, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again to represent the students. When we look at this, we can see student 1 got 1 whole brick, another whole brick, 1 piece here, and 1 piece here, which means that the student got 2 whole and 2/5 of what was remaining. If I wanted to change that to an improper fraction, I could do so by taking the whole number times the denominator plus the numerator. So that would be 2 times 5 plus 2, which gives me 12/5. So each person got 12/5 of the clay. Do you notice 12 and 5 were the numbers I had in the problem? Question 4, Mr. Davis Geese laid 18 eggs. What fraction of a dozen is this? Well, first we had to determine that a dozen is really 12 eggs. That's how many eggs are in a dozen. So if we want to determine how much of a dozen, first we have to remove 1 dozen of the eggs. So we're going to take out 12 of the eggs to start with. That gives me 1 whole dozen. How many eggs out of the dozen do I have left? I have 6 out of the 12 left in my dozen. Or I could say I had 1 1/2 dozen eggs. If I had to change this to an improper fraction, again, I'm going to take my whole number times my denominator plus my numerator. That means I'm going to take 1 times 12 plus 6 to find out that I have 18/12. The next example had to do with 100 blocks. We first determined that each one of these blocks were broken into 100 smaller squares. Then we determined how many of the squares were actually shaded. We came up with 233 squares were shaded out of a total of how many squares does each block contain? Because we want to have 100 squares. That's what we have, so our denominator has to be 100. Then if we decided to break that up and make it a mixed number, we asked how many sets of 100 can I take out of 233? Which means I can take 2 whole sets of 100 out of here And how many do I have left over? Would be 33 out of 100. The denominator stays the same. The last example was on a number line. We discussed how the number that is the beginning of it, whatever number that the dot we are looking for falls between, is our whole number. We start at 5. That is our whole number. Then we want to figure out how many sections do we break the line up into. Well, we can count the spaces. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces. That means the denominator is 7. I'm breaking it up into 7 parts. How many ticks or marks or spots did I go over? I went over 1, 2, 3, 4. You can count them. So my number is 5 and 4/7. Again, change it to an improper fraction. Take the whole number 5 times 7 plus 4, and you'll find out that you end up with 39 over 4. You can go ahead and fill in all the spaces on your paper. Try homework, which is page 9, and we'll discuss it next day in class.